The flames consumed the paper in seconds, curling the edges until my name disappeared into ash. My stepmother held the lighter steady, her smile never wavering as she watched 25 years of my relationship with my father turn to smoke above the mahogany table. The lawyer's face remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. My half-brothers shifted in their leather chairs, uncomfortable with the theatrics, but saying nothing. "There," Margaret said, setting the lighter down with a soft click. "That's what your father really thought of you, David. $100, 100, for the son who never visited, never called, never cared." Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had waited years for this moment. I stared at the small pile of ash where my inheritance had been. $100. After everything. After the fights, the years of silence, the missed birthdays and holidays. After I'd chosen my mother's side in the divorce when I was 12. After I'd refused to call this woman mom, or accept her children as my brothers. My father had reduced our entire relationship to a symbolic gesture, pocket change and public humiliation. The conference room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick with the scent of burnt paper and expensive cologne. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline stretched gray and indifferent under October clouds. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the normal world continuing while mine crumbled in this sterile corporate space. "Well," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, "I guess that settles it." Margaret's triumph was palpable. She'd orchestrated this moment perfectly. The dramatic reading, the public burning, the witnesses. My half-brothers, James and Robert, both in their pristine suits, both beneficiaries of the real estate empire our father had built. They would inherit the construction company, the properties, the investment accounts, everything that should have been partly mine. "The estate is quite substantial," the lawyer continued, his voice carefully neutral as he shuffled through documents. "The primary residence in Bellevue, the vacation home in the San Juan Islands, the commercial properties downtown. Mrs. Henderson, as the surviving spouse, inherits the majority, with significant portions designated for James and Robert." I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. 25 years of estrangement, and this was how it ended. Not with reconciliation or understanding, but with theatrical cruelty. My father had always been dramatic, but this felt like Margaret's touch. The public humiliation, the calculated timing. "David," James said quietly, the first words he'd spoken since we'd gathered. "I'm sorry don't." I held up my hand. "Just don't." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If there's nothing else, I believe we can conclude." "Actually," he said, reaching into his briefcase with deliberate slowness, "there is one more item." The room went silent. Margaret's confident expression flickered for just a moment. The lawyer withdrew a sealed envelope, cream-colored and thick, with my name written across the front in my father's familiar handwriting. "This was to be delivered only after the will reading," he said, extending it toward me. "Your father's specific instructions." My hand trembled as I took it. The paper felt expensive, substantial. Nothing like the cheap copy of the will that had just become ash. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes sharp with sudden concern. "What is that?" she demanded. The lawyer's expression remained neutral. "I'm not privy to the contents. Mr. Henderson's instructions were simply to deliver it after the formal reading." I held the envelope, feeling its weight. Whatever was inside felt like more than just a letter. The silence stretched until I could hear the building's ventilation system, the distant sound of elevators, my own heartbeat. Margaret's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Open it," Robert said softly. I looked at each of them, Margaret with her growing anxiety, my half-brothers with their curious concern, the lawyer with his professional detachment. Then I carefully broke the seal, my fingers working slowly along the edge. The envelope opened to reveal not just a letter but something else. Something that made Margaret gasp and my half-brothers lean forward in their chairs. Inside was a key. The key was old brass, worn smooth by years of handling, attached to a small leather fob with an address embossed in fading gold letters. 1247 Pine Street. I recognized it immediately. The building downtown where my father had started his first construction office 40 years ago. The building I'd visited as a child, back when he still wanted me around. Back when I was his heir apparent instead of his greatest disappointment. Margaret's face had gone white. "That building was sold," she said quickly. "Years ago, before we married." I unfolded the letter with careful fingers. My father's handwriting, shakier than I remembered but unmistakably his, filled 2 pages of heavy stationery. The lawyer watched silently, his professional mask slipping slightly to reveal something that might have been anticipation. "David," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then Margaret has performed exactly as I expected. The will reading was theater, son. Necessary theater, but theater nonetheless." My throat tightened. I could hear his voice in the words, that familiar mixture of gruffness and unexpected tenderness that had confused me throughout my childhood. The $100 inheritance was real, legal, witnessed, but it was never the point. Margaret needed to believe she'd won completely, needed to feel secure in her victory. She needed to burn that check with satisfaction, needed to see you humiliated. Only then would she stop watching, stop questioning, stop digging. I glanced up. Margaret was gripping the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white. James and Robert exchanged confused looks. The lawyer remained perfectly still, but I caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "The truth is, son, I never stopped loving you. Even when you chose your mother, even when you stopped calling, even when you refused to come to my wedding or acknowledge my new family. I understood. Your mother poisoned you against me, but I understood. You were 12. You were protecting the only parent who stayed." The words blurred as my eyes filled. I blinked hard, forcing myself to continue reading. 1247. Pine Street was never sold. I transferred it to a trust 20 years ago. A trust that becomes yours upon my death. But it's not just the building, David. It's what's in the building. What I've been preparing for you since the day you walked out of my life. Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is impossible." I would have known. "I handled his finances, I signed the papers." "You signed the papers I showed you," the lawyer said quietly. Mr. Henderson was quite thorough in his preparations. I turned the page, my hands shaking now. The second page contained details that made my breath catch. Account numbers, investment portfolios, property deeds. A construction company, not the one Margaret and my half-brothers had inherited, but a smaller firm that had been operating quietly for 15 years. Operating in my name. "Henderson and Son Construction," I read aloud, my voice barely a whisper. "You've been the majority shareholder since your 18th birthday," the lawyer confirmed. "Your father funded it entirely, managed it through a series of trusts and shell companies. It's been quite profitable." The numbers on the page swam before my eyes. 7 figures, 8 figures, properties across 3 states, contracts with major developers. My father hadn't just left me something. He'd built me an empire in secret, an empire that dwarfed what he'd left to his legitimate family. Margaret sank back into her chair, her face ashen. "How much?" she whispered. I looked at the final paragraph of the letter, my father's last words to me. "I know you'll never forgive me for the years we lost. I know sorry isn't enough, but maybe this is. Maybe knowing that every day for 25 years I was building something for you, believing in you, hoping you'd come home. The key opens more than just a building, son. It opens the life I always wanted to give you, the life you deserved. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry it took my death to tell you." The silence in the room was absolute. Through the windows, Seattle continued its indifferent existence. But in this conference room, everything had changed. Margaret stared at the table. Her triumph transformed into something that looked like grief. My half-brothers sat frozen, processing the revelation that their inheritance was a fraction of what their father had secretly given to the son they'd thought he'd disowned. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my jacket pocket along with the key. The lawyer was gathering his papers with efficient movements, his job nearly complete. "There's one more thing," he said, withdrawing a final document. "A letter for Mrs. Henderson." Margaret looked up sharply, hope flickering in her eyes. But when she opened the envelope, her face crumpled. She read silently, then let the paper fall to the table. "What does it say?" James asked gently. Margaret's voice was barely audible. He knew. About the affair, about the forged signatures, about everything. She looked at me with something that might have been respect. "He says he forgives me, but that David was always his real son, his only son." The weight of 25 years of misunderstanding settled over the room like dust. I stood slowly, the key warm in my palm, my father's letter a solid presence against my heart. Outside, the October sky was beginning to clear. patches of blue visible between the clouds. The drive to Pine Street took 20 minutes through downtown traffic, but it felt like traveling through time. I parked across from 1247, a narrow brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a vintage bookstore. 4 stories with large windows that had been painted black from the inside. No signs, no indication of what lay within. I'd driven past this building hundreds of times over the years, never knowing it held the secret architecture of my father's love. The key turned smoothly in the heavy wooden door, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, the air smelled of sawdust and coffee, familiar scents that transported me instantly to childhood Saturday mornings when my father would take me to job sites. The ground floor was a workshop, not abandoned or dusty, but actively maintained. Tools hung in precise rows. Blueprints covered a drafting table, and a coffee mug sat beside a half-finished crossword puzzle, as if someone had just stepped out. A note was taped to the drafting table in my father's handwriting. David, Mrs. Chen has been maintaining this space for 20 years. She has keys to everything. Her number is on the refrigerator. She's been waiting to meet you. Dad. I climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Here was an office that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. Wood paneling, leather chairs, a massive desk with a green banker's lamp. But the papers scattered across the surface were recent. Contracts, building permits, financial statements, all bearing the letterhead Henderson & Son Construction and my signature. A signature I'd never written. The third floor took my breath away. It was an apartment, fully furnished but clearly unused. A kitchen with modern appliances still in their plastic wrapping. A living room with a leather sofa positioned to face the large windows overlooking the street. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with volumes I remembered from my childhood. Adventure novels, biographies of architects and builders. The complete works of Robert Frost. My father's favorites, waiting for me to rediscover them. But it was the 4th floor that broke me completely. The entire space had been converted into a gallery of sorts, with photographs covering every wall. Pictures of me from birth to adulthood. Some I remembered being taken, others captured from a distance. My high school graduation. There was my father in the crowd, barely visible but unmistakably present. My college commencement, where I'd scanned the audience looking for him and found only strangers. He'd been there. My wedding to Sarah, where I'd deliberately not invited him. He'd been across the street photographing the moment from behind a tree. 25 years of my life, documented with the patience of a man who refused to give up hope. In the center of the room stood a large table covered with architectural drawings, plans for houses, office buildings, shopping centers, each one marked with dates spanning the last 2 decades, each one signed D. Henderson, Project Manager. He'd been designing buildings in my name, creating a portfolio of work that established me as one of the most successful architects in the Pacific Northwest. Work I'd never done, success I'd never earned, but somehow rightfully mine. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Henderson, this is Mrs. Chen. I saw the lights come on. Would you like some coffee? I've been making your father's blend every morning for 20 years, hoping this day would come. I sank into the chair at the drafting table, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what my father had built. Not just a business or a building, but a bridge across 25 years of silence, a way back to each other that transcended death itself. The photographs watched me from their frames as I tried to process the impossible reality. My father had never stopped being my father, even when I'd rejected him, even when I'd chosen sides in a war that had already been lost, even when I'd built my own life deliberately separate from his. He'd been there, invisible but constant, building something for the day when I might be ready to come home. I picked up the phone and dialed Mrs. Chen's number. Hello? Her voice was warm, tinged with an accent I couldn't place. Mrs. Chen, this is David Henderson. A pause, then a sound that might have been crying. Oh, Mr. David, your father, he talked about you every day, every single day for 20 years. He said you would come when you were ready. He said love doesn't have an expiration date. I'd like that coffee, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I'd like to hear about my father, the father I never knew I had. I'll put the pot on, she said. And Mr. David, welcome home. I hung up and looked around the room one more time. In a few hours, Margaret would discover that her inheritance was conditional, tied to a prenuptial agreement that voided everything if she ever committed adultery. My half-brothers would learn that their father had loved them, but differently, without the desperate intensity of a parent trying to bridge an impossible gap. The lawyer would file the papers that made me the legal owner of an empire I'd never known existed. But right now, in this moment, surrounded by evidence of a love I'd thought was lost forever, I understood something my father had tried to teach me 25 years ago. Family isn't about blood or loyalty or choosing sides. It's about never giving up on the people who matter, even when they've given up on themselves. The October sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the photographs and plans and dreams my father had preserved like artifacts of faith. Somewhere below, Mrs. Chen was making coffee, preparing to tell me stories about the man who'd spent half his life building a bridge back to his son. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Sarah's number. My ex-wife deserved to know that the man she'd thought was a failure had actually been something else entirely. That the father I'd spent our entire marriage resenting had never stopped believing in us, even when we'd stopped believing in ourselves. But first, I had 20 years of coffee to catch up on, and a lifetime of stories to hear about the father who'd loved me enough to wait. Mrs. Chen appeared at the door 15 minutes later, carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs and a plate of homemade cookies. She was smaller than I'd expected, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that held decades of kindness. She moved through the space with the familiarity of someone who'd been caring for it longer than I'd been an adult. "Your father, he hired me when my husband died," she said, settling into the chair across from me. 23 years ago. I was cleaning offices downtown, barely speaking English. He said he needed someone to take care of this place, someone who understood about waiting. The coffee was perfect, rich and dark with a hint of cinnamon, exactly how my father had made it on those Saturday mornings when I was 8 years old, before the divorce changed everything. "He came here every Sunday," Mrs. Chen continued. "Every Sunday for 20 years. He would sit right where you're sitting now, looking through those photographs, updating the business records. Sometimes he would cry. Sometimes he would laugh remembering some story about you. Always he would say the same thing. David will come home when he's ready. Love doesn't have an expiration date." I traced the rim of my coffee mug, trying to process the image of my father spending decades in this shrine to our broken relationship. Did he ever say why he didn't just call? Why he didn't try to contact me directly? Mrs. Chen smiled sadly. "He tried, Mr. David. Many times. But your mother, she made it very clear. Any contact would result in legal action, restraining orders. He was not to interfere with your life. So he found another way." She reached into her purse and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every graduation, he wrote you letters, hundreds of them. He never sent them, but he wrote them. He said someday you might want to know what he was thinking all those years." The envelope was heavy in my hands. Through the thin paper, I could feel the weight of 2 decades of unsent words. My father's voice, preserved in ink, waiting for me to be ready to hear it. "There's something else," Mrs. Chen said gently. "The business, Henderson and Son. It wasn't just a shell company. Your father, he really ran it. Every project, every decision. He would say, what would David do? How would David solve this problem? He built it the way he thought you would build it. Honest work, fair wages, buildings that last." She pulled out a folder filled with newspaper clippings. "Look." The articles spanned 15 years. "Henderson and Son wins Sustainable Building Award. Local construction company donates labor for homeless shelter. Henderson and Son leads industry and worker safety standards." My name was mentioned in every article as the company's visionary leader, the architect behind its ethical practices and innovative designs. "He gave interviews," Mrs. Chen explained, always talking about his son, the brilliant architect who insisted on doing things the right way. "He was so proud, Mr. David. So proud of the man you became, even from a distance." I stared at a photograph from 5 years ago. My father accepting an award for community service, holding a plaque that read, "In honor of David Henderson's vision for responsible development." He looked older than I remembered, grayer, but his eyes held the same intensity I'd inherited. "The employees," I said slowly. "They think I've been running the company?" "Oh no," Mrs. Chen laughed. "They know your father was in charge, but they also know everything he did was for you. They've been waiting to meet you too. 27 employees, Mr. David. Good people. They know the story. They know about the son who was coming home someday." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah, David, I just heard about your father's will from Janet Morrison. Are you okay? I know how complicated things were between you two. I showed Mrs. Chen the message. She nodded approvingly. Your father? He liked your wife. He said she had good eyes, kind hands. He was sad when you divorced. He knew about that too? He knew everything, Mr. David. He said love means paying attention even when it hurts. The afternoon sun was shifting, casting longer shadows across the photographs. I found myself studying a picture from my wedding day. Sarah and me on the church steps, laughing at something the photographer had said. In the background, barely visible behind a tree, was my father. He'd been close enough to hear our vows, close enough to see Sarah's dress, close enough to witness the most important day of my life from the shadows. Why didn't he ever remarry? I asked. After my mother, after the divorce. He was still young. Mrs. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. He tried. Margaret, she was persistent, but he said his heart was already spoken for. He said he was married to hope. The weight of 25 years of misunderstanding settled over me like a physical thing. All those years I'd spent angry, feeling abandoned, building a life deliberately separate from his influence. All those years he'd spent building bridges I was too stubborn to cross. Mrs. Chen, I said finally, what happens now? With the company, with this place? She smiled, the first truly happy expression I'd seen from her. Now you decide, Mr. David. Your father, he built all this for you, but he never wanted to trap you. The company can continue as it is, or you can change everything. The building can stay as it is, or you can make it your own. He said the only thing that mattered was that you knew, that you understood he never stopped being your father. I walked to the window and looked down at Pine Street. People hurried past on the sidewalk below, caught up in their own stories, their own complicated relationships. Somewhere across town, Margaret was probably calling lawyers, trying to understand how her perfect victory had turned into devastating defeat. My half-brothers were likely sitting in their inherited offices, wondering if they'd ever really known their father at all. But here, in this room filled with evidence of patient love, I was beginning to understand something I'd been too young and too hurt to see 25 years ago. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing love over anger, hope over bitterness, connection over pride. I turned back to Mrs. Chen, who was watching me with the gentle patience of someone who'd spent decades tending other people's dreams. I'd like to meet the employees, I said. I'd like to understand what my father built, and I'd like to read those letters. Her smile could have lit the entire building. He knew you would say that. He said, David has his mother's stubborn streak, but he has my heart. When he's ready, he'll come home. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I sat in my father's chair and opened the first letter. It was dated 24 years ago, written on my 21st birthday. Dear David, today you became a man and I wasn't there to see it. But I want you to know that somewhere in this city, your father is raising a glass to the finest son a man could ask for. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm waiting for the day when you're ready to let me tell you that in person. Outside, the city lights were beginning to twinkle. Inside, Mrs. Chen quietly refilled my coffee cup and settled back into her chair, ready to spend the evening telling me stories about the father I'd thought I'd lost, but who had never really left at all. The letters spanned 24 years of my life, each one a window into my father's heart during our years of separation. I read them chronologically, watching his handwriting change from the bold strokes of a man in his 40s to the careful script of someone fighting arthritis in his 70s. Mrs. Chen sat quietly beside me, occasionally pointing out a photograph that corresponded to a particular letter, creating a parallel narrative of love observed from a distance. Dear David, read the letter from my college graduation. I watched you walk across that stage today and I saw the man you've become. Your mother raised you well, better than I could have probably. You have her intelligence and her integrity. I hope someday you'll forgive me for not being the father you deserved when you needed me most. There were letters about my first job, my engagement to Sarah, my promotion to senior architect at Morrison & Associates, letters about the fights he'd witnessed between Sarah and me in restaurant parking lots, the concern he'd felt watching our marriage struggle, the quiet celebration when he'd seen us laughing together at a street festival. He followed you, Mrs. Chen said gently when I looked up in amazement. Not stalking, not intruding, just keeping watch, like a guardian angel who couldn't reveal himself. The letter from my divorce was the hardest to read. Dear David, I saw you moving your things out of the house today. I wanted so badly to help you carry those boxes, to tell you that divorce doesn't mean failure, that sometimes love means letting go. I wanted to buy you a beer and listen to you talk about what went wrong. Instead, I sat in my car across the street and cried for the son I couldn't comfort. By the time I reached the final letter, written just 3 months before his death, the sun had set completely. The building around us had grown quiet, the street below empty except for the occasional late commuter heading home. Dear David, the last letter began. The doctors say I have 6 months, maybe less. I'm not afraid of dying, son. I'm afraid of dying without you knowing how proud I am of the man you became. I'm afraid of leaving this world without telling you that every day for 25 years, I've carried you in my heart. I've built something for you, not just money or property, but proof that love endures even when it can't be spoken. When you read this, I'll be gone, but my love for you will remain in every brick of this building, every photograph on these walls, every employee who knows your name and has been waiting to meet you. Come home, David. It's time to come home. I set the letter down with trembling hands. Mrs. Chen reached over and squeezed my shoulder, her touch gentle and maternal. He was at peace at the end, she said softly. He said he'd done everything he could. The rest was up to you. My phone rang, startling us both. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. David, I've been thinking about you all day. I know today was difficult. Sarah, my voice cracked slightly. Can I ask you something? Did you ever feel like someone was watching over us? During our marriage, I mean, like we had some kind of guardian angel? A long pause. That's a strange question, but yes, actually. There were times when I felt like we weren't alone, like someone was rooting for us even when we were falling apart. Why? I looked around the room filled with photographs of our life together, evidence of my father's silent vigil over our relationship. I found out some things today about my father, about the kind of man he really was. Do you want to talk about it? I could come over or we could meet somewhere. Actually, I said, surprising myself, would you like to see something? Something that might help you understand why our marriage meant so much to me, even when I couldn't explain it. An hour later, Sarah stood in the doorway of the 4th floor, her eyes wide as she took in the gallery of our shared history. She moved slowly from photograph to photograph, her hand covering her mouth as she recognized moments we'd thought were private, celebrations we'd thought were unwitnessed. David, she whispered, stopping in front of our wedding photo. He was there. Your father was at our wedding. He was at everything, I said. Every important moment of our lives. He was there. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. All those years you thought he didn't care. All those times you said he'd abandoned you. I was wrong, I said simply. About everything. We stood together in the silence, surrounded by evidence of a love so patient and enduring that it had survived decades of rejection. Sarah reached for my hand and I let her take it, grateful for the warmth of human connection in this shrine to devotion. What will you do now? She asked. I looked around the room one more time at the photographs and letters and architectural plans that represented my father's faith in a future he wouldn't live to see. I'm going to run the company he built for me. I'm going to live up to the reputation he created in my name, and I'm going to try to be the man he always believed I could be. Sarah smiled through her tears. He would be proud of you. I hope so, I said. I hope it's not too late. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, carrying a fresh pot of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose long vigil was finally ending. Mr. David, she said, your father left one more thing for you. Something he said you should have when you were ready to forgive. She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring, worn smooth by decades of wear. My father's wedding ring from his marriage to my mother. The ring he'd never stopped wearing even after the divorce, even after Margaret. He said to tell you that love doesn't end just because circumstances change, Mrs. Chen explained. He said some promises are meant to last forever. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling its familiar weight. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting 25 years to come home. Outside, Seattle sparkled in the darkness, full of people living their own complicated stories of love and loss and redemption. But here, in this building my father had filled with hope, surrounded by the evidence of his unwavering faith, I finally understood what he'd been trying to teach me all along, that love is not about being perfect or always being present. It's about never giving up, even when giving up would be easier. It's about building bridges across impossible distances and waiting, with infinite patience for the day when someone is ready to cross them. The October night was clear and cold, but inside 1247 Pine Street, warmth filled every corner. My father was gone, but his love remained, solid and enduring as the buildings he'd constructed in my name. And for the first time in 25 years, I was ready to come home. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of Henderson & Son Construction, looking out at 27 faces that had become as familiar as family. The morning meeting was ending. Another successful project completed ahead of schedule. Another client satisfied with work that bore my father's invisible signature. But today felt different. Today I had news that would change everything. Before we wrap up, I said, setting down the quarterly reports, I have something to share with all of you. Maria Santos, our lead foreman, leaned forward with interest. She'd been with the company for 12 years, had known my father's vision better than anyone. Good news or bad news, boss? I smiled, remembering how my father used to answer that same question. Depends on how you feel about change. The room grew quiet. These people had trusted my father's dream, had believed in his promise that someday his son would return to lead them. They'd welcomed me with open arms, teaching me the business from the ground up, sharing stories about the man who'd built their livelihoods while building mine. I've been thinking about expansion, I continued, about taking on bigger projects, maybe opening a second office. But I realized something important. This company was never just about construction. It was about family, about taking care of people. I pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for weeks. So I've made a decision. Every employee who's been with Henderson & Son for more than 5 years is getting equity in the company, real ownership, real profit sharing. The silence was absolute. Then Maria started crying, and suddenly everyone was talking at once, voices overlapping with disbelief and gratitude. Tom Bradley, our oldest carpenter, stood up slowly, his weathered hands shaking. Your father, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He always said you'd do something like this. He said you had a heart bigger than your pride. After the meeting, I walked through the workshop, running my hands along the tools my father had maintained for decades. Mrs. Chen appeared beside me as she often did, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone watching a long-held dream come true. He knew, she said simply. He knew you would share the blessing. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dinner tonight, I have news. We'd been seeing each other again, carefully, tentatively, not trying to recreate what we'd lost, but building something new on the foundation of who we'd become. The divorce papers were still filed, but the lawyers had been told to wait. Some things we'd learned were worth rebuilding slowly. That evening, Sarah met me at the Pine Street building. She'd taken to coming here with me sometimes, helping me sort through my father's papers, learning about the man who'd watched over our marriage from the shadows. Tonight she seemed nervous, excited, her hands fluttering as she spoke. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, settling into the chair across from my father's desk. About second chances, about building something better than what came before. I waited, sensing something important in her careful words. I want to come back, she said suddenly. Not to the old marriage, not to who we were before, but to you, to us, to whatever we can become together. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and risk. Through the windows, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars, the city alive with stories of love lost and found and lost again. Sarah, I said carefully, are you sure? We failed once. We hurt each other. We were different people then, she replied. You were carrying anger you didn't understand. I was trying to love someone who couldn't love himself, but look at you now. Look at what you've built, what you've become. Your father's love changed you, David. It made you whole. I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago. Bitter, isolated, convinced that love was just another word for disappointment. Then I thought about the employees who now owned pieces of the company their loyalty had helped build. About Mrs. Chen, who'd spent 20 years tending someone else's hope. About my father, who'd never stopped believing in the possibility of redemption. There's something else, Sarah continued, reaching into her purse. I found this in my jewelry box last week. I'd forgotten I still had it. She placed her engagement ring on the desk between us, the diamond catching the light from my father's old banker's lamp. I never sold it, never threw it away. I told myself I kept it for practical reasons, but I think I was waiting. waiting for the man you were meant to become. I picked up the ring, feeling its familiar weight. What are you asking me, Sarah? I'm asking if you believe in second chances. I'm asking if you think love can survive failure and come back stronger. I'm asking if you want to try again. The question echoed in the silence of the room where my father had spent decades believing in exactly that. The possibility that love could endure any separation, survive any misunderstanding, bridge any gap if you just refused to give up. Yes, I said, taking her hand. Yes to all of it. As I slipped the ring back onto her finger, I felt my father's presence in the room, his approval in the way the light fell across the photographs of our life together. Love doesn't have an expiration date, he'd told Mrs. Chen. Some promises are meant to last forever. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, but inside, surrounded by the evidence of patient faith, we began planning a future built on the foundation of hard-won wisdom and second chances. 1 year later, I stood at the altar of the same church where Sarah and I had married 15 years earlier. But this time, the ceremony was different. This time, we understood what we were promising each other. This time, we knew the weight of the words, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. The church was full, employees from Henderson & Son, friends who'd watched our journey from destruction to redemption, Mrs. Chen in the front row wearing her best dress and crying happy tears. But the seat that mattered most was empty. The seat where my father should have been, would have been if I'd been wise enough to invite him the first time. As Sarah walked down the aisle, radiant in a simple white dress, I touched the ring on my finger, my father's ring, which I now wore alongside my wedding band. A reminder that love endures, that family transcends death, that some bonds are stronger than pride or time or misunderstanding. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness the renewal of vows between David and Sarah Henderson, and to celebrate the power of love to heal, to forgive, and to begin again. After the ceremony, the reception was held at 1247 Pine Street. The building had been transformed. The first floor now served as Henderson & Son's main office. The second floor housed our design studio. The third floor had become a conference center, and the fourth floor remained exactly as my father had left it, a shrine to patient love, a reminder of what was possible when you refused to give up hope. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing in front of the photograph wall, studying the images of my life that my father had collected with such devotion. Sarah appeared beside me, her hand finding mine. Do you think he would have approved? She asked, nodding toward the celebration below. I think he would have been proud, I said. Not just of us, but of everyone here. Look around, Sarah. Look at what his faith created. The room was full of people whose lives had been touched by my father's vision. Maria Santos was there with her family, her children playing with the other employees' kids. Tom Bradley was telling stories about the old days to a group of young carpenters. Mrs. Chen was showing wedding photos to anyone who would look, beaming with the pride of a grandmother. But it was the newest addition to our family that made the evening truly complete. In the corner, a bassinet held our 3-month-old daughter, Elizabeth Margaret Henderson, named for my mother, and in a gesture of forgiveness that had surprised everyone, including myself, for Margaret. My stepmother had reached out 6 months after the will reading, broken and humbled by the revelation of my father's true feelings. The affair had ended, the prenuptial agreement had been enforced, and she'd lost everything except the chance to apologize. I'd met with her once in a coffee shop downtown, and listened as she explained how my father's love for me had driven her to jealousy, how she'd spent years trying to erase me from his life because she couldn't bear to share his heart. He never stopped talking about you, she'd said through tears. Even on his deathbed, he was worried about you, wondering if you'd ever forgive him. I hated you for that. I hated that he loved you more than he loved me. I'd forgiven her, not because she deserved it, but because my father's love had taught me that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger, about choosing hope over bitterness, about breaking cycles of hurt that can span generations. Now, as I held my daughter and watched my wife laugh with Mrs. Chen, I understood the full scope of my father's gift. He hadn't just left me money or property or a successful business. He'd left me a blueprint for love, patient, enduring, unconditional. He'd shown me that family isn't about blood or proximity or perfect relationships. It's about choosing to believe in people even when they can't believe in themselves. David, Mrs. Chen appeared at my elbow carrying a wrapped package. I have something for you. Something your father wanted you to have when you became a father yourself. Inside the package was a leather journal, worn soft with age. The first page contained a note in my father's handwriting. For David, when he holds his first child, the greatest construction project of all is building a family. Here's how I learned to do it, and how I failed, and how love taught me to try again. The journal was filled with my father's thoughts on parenthood, written over the course of my childhood and beyond. Advice about patience and discipline and the importance of showing up, even when showing up is hard. Reflections on his mistakes with me, his regrets about the divorce, his hopes for the future. The final entry was dated just weeks before his death. David will be a better father than I was, because he's learned that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about never giving up, even when giving up would be easier. It's about building something that lasts longer than your own life. As the evening wound down and the last guest departed, Sarah and I stood alone in the gallery with our daughter. The photographs watched over us. 3 generations of Hendersons, connected by bonds that had proven stronger than death itself. "What do you think she'll think of all this someday?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the walls covered with evidence of her grandfather's devotion. "I think she'll understand that love is the only thing that really matters," I said. "That everything else, money, success, pride, is just noise. But love, real love, the kind that waits and hopes and believes, that's what builds legacies." Outside, Seattle slept under a blanket of stars. Inside, 1247 Pine Street, surrounded by the echoes of my father's faith and the promise of my daughter's future, I finally understood what he'd been trying to teach me all along, that the greatest inheritance isn't what you leave behind, but what you build in the hearts of the people you love. The building would stand for generations, a testament to one man's refusal to give up on his son. But the real legacy lived in the choices I would make as a father, the love I would show my daughter, the patience I would practice when she inevitably broke my heart and found her way back to me. Love doesn't have an expiration date. Some promises are meant to last forever, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to keep them.